Is this scaring you? It's scaring me a little bit. But what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen is, I guess the worst would be the whole shrub dies, right? That would be the absolute worst. That's not going to happen. I know that's not going to happen. So once you realize that the worst is not going to happen, then it becomes more calming, right? Then you can say, oh, if the worst isn't going to happen, I'm pretty good. Today I'm pruning the world's largest Rheingold Arborvitae. In fact, 2 of them. They aren't really the world's largest. They just feel that way. I haven't pruned them in about 3 years because birds have been nesting in them. They start nesting in early spring. They nest all summer into the fall. Even though it's not the right time to prune your Rheingold Arborvitaes or any of your evergreen shrubs, I've got to prune them here in November. I'm in Zone 7, Southern New Jersey, so I do luck out that it's a little bit on the warmer side for me to do this. But this is the only time the little birds aren't in them, and I have a soft spot for them. So I definitely don't want to prune while they're making their nests and having their little baby birds. I'm Laura. Welcome to Garden Sanity. Let's get started. So first, just a little bit about these shrubs, just so you know what they are in case you're interested in buying them. They are actually beautiful for your landscape. Don't let this large size fool you. The average size for Rheingold Arborvitaes are 3 to 5 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet wide. Now, I kind of disagree with that a little bit. I would say it's more 4 to 5 feet wide, 4 to 5 feet tall. However, you can trim them and keep them shaped to the size you want. It's very easy to do, so don't let these large ones fool you. In fact, what I like to do before I'm doing a project like this is I like to measure. So let's measure and just see how tall these are. I'm going to try to measure all the way up to this guy. In fact, I don't even know if he is in your camera range, so we'll see. But I'm just going to pull this out. Yeah, I'm way too short to measure this. So this is 6 feet, right where my thumb is on this, and I think the tallest frond here is a little bit taller than that. So we're starting with the tallest thing being about 6 feet. Most of it is down here. It's around 5 feet. Same with this one, and they both are about a little bit over 6 feet wide. So much larger than I wanted to have as a nice little shrub entrance to our patio. So we're definitely going to try to take these down a little bit, maybe even more than a little bit. Now, Rheingold Arborvitaes have an absolute beautiful color. In the spring, it's a bright green. It's got a touch of gold on it, but it's not as gold as, say, something like a gold mop cypress. But this is a bright green with tinges of gold all summer into fall, and then in the fall, when the weather starts to cool off, you're going to start to see some bronze and copper tinges on the edge of the shrub, and then by early winter the shrub is a beautiful copper color. It looks so pretty, and it still has some tinges of green, so it is an absolute beautiful shrub, especially in the winter landscape. So I really like this as a year-round shrub because of the color changes, and it just looks magnificent along with all your other evergreens, perennials, flowering shrubs, you name it. So the growing requirements for Rheingold Arborvitaes are very easy. They are hardy in zones 3 through 7, and I'm in Zone 7, Southern New Jersey, so I'm on the warmest part of where these will grow nicely. They take full sun, but again, if you are in a warmer climate like me, they can take a little bit of partial shade and be just fine. These get afternoon shade and no problem. They're thriving, as you can see. They like to have average to moist soil, but that soil has to be well drained. So they don't like sitting in wet at all. However, they do, like most arborvitaes, prefer a decent amount of moisture. So Rheingold Arborvitaes are very slow growing, despite what you see here. This is over many years. They're very slow growing, so they don't need any kind of fertilizer that pushes them to grow like a chemical fertilizer would do. So in the spring, just as they're starting to wake up, that's when you want to fertilize them, and just use a slow release organic fertilizer. I'll put what I use on the screen. And that's all you really need. This is an easy shrub to take care of. If you need to prune it, and you really don't need to prune it every year unless you just want to shape it here or there or trim it and keep it to a certain size. And again, this is a bad example which I hope to correct. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. These ones were purchased back in 2008, and I planted these in our front yard just the spring after we moved into this house. I was really excited because they were, again, very small in their little containers that I bought at the garden nursery. And I quickly realized within a year that no, where I planted them, they were already going to start blocking the hydrangeas that I had behind them. So that's when we moved them in 2010 back here. And they were very small at the time. And in fact, there's an edging that you don't even see down at the bottom. And that is part of what I want to take back, because our little walkway here has quickly become sort of a one-person walkway. So, and one last point that you might not get on a plant tag about Rheingold Arborvitaes is they actually like humid weather. So they thrive in the summertime in this area because it is hot and humid. In drier conditions, they don't do as well, and in part because in drier conditions you get a lot more wind, and wind can really dry out the ends of the stems, sometimes turning them brown. In the wintertime, if they're in an exposed site and it's super windy and they don't get much moisture, like maybe snow or rain, you might see the tips brown a little bit. And that's not a big deal, so don't panic. You'll just trim those off in the spring. It's not going to be a big deal. But once these grow and get established, like these, which have been back here again since 2010, it's now 2023, even hurricanes and tropical storms haven't bothered these. Sadly, we've had both. But nothing bothers these because their roots are more established, they've grown down, they've grown out, and they are secure in their spot. But just a tip, they like humid rather than super dry. So now I'm going to tell you the supplies I'm going to use. I use my handy dandy garden gloves. These are by CoolJob. I swear by these. These are the only ones I use for all my gardening. Underneath that is my garden kneeler bench, which I may need to get down low. We'll see. So for 99% of the pruning, hopefully 100%, I will be using bypass pruners. These are by Fiskars. I love them. Very basic, yet very effective. If there's any thicker branches that the hand pruners can't get, I will use these short-handled loppers. I love these. They're super lightweight. I got them from Gardener Supply Company. The blade is super sharp. They are really light, so your arms don't get nearly as fatigued as they do with long-handled loppers. Water. Always hydrate yourself. Don't forget. And the last thing I want to show you are these sleeves. These are from Farmer's Defense. They're garden sleeves. They are great to use. I love these. I have 2 pair. I got mine in medium. They have different sizes. You'll see they have this nice thing you can put for your fingers. However, I like to fold mine back because I use garden gloves. And they go all the way up your arm. Now, truth be told, mine were a little tight up here. So I did make, I don't know where you can see it, I did make a little, in full disclosure, a little snip right here, and just that was enough for the elastic not to kill me because the elastic is very secure. But you'll see me wearing these, and I absolutely love them because they're SPF 50. They are cooling, so even in the heat of the summer, these were okay for me to wear. But most importantly, when you're pruning, you get your arm into shrubs, and if you have skin sensitivities or not, sometimes constantly rubbing back and forth gets your arms a little bit scratched up, depending on what kind of foliage. This is very soft for the Rheingold for the most part, but that's what these are. So if you're interested, again, all the links are in the description box below. And one tool I don't want you to use are electric hedge trimmers. This shrub is not meant for that. You bought this shrub at the nursery because it was so cute, right? It had cute little stems with these pretty needles. They were either in a bright green or maybe they still had some copper on them. You just want to keep the shrub looking as natural as possible. And with electric hedge trimmers, it's going to take quite a while until you see more of that natural growth grow back. So I suggest using the pruners. I'm going to show you it doesn't take that long even on this very large shrub. So this is one of the Rheingolds, and this one over here is the one I'm going to do today. So as you can see, it still has somewhat of a rounded shape. Here you can see how it's sort of encroached, not sort of, it has encroached on our little pavers right here that lead up to our patio. So you can see how much of the sides I'd like to take off. Look at that. It reaches almost halfway across. Then here's the sides going around to the other side. In fact, to give you perspective, this is the King's Gold Mop Cypress that you've seen me prune in previous videos. And this is the other side of it, and it comes right in to the sea green juniper, which you saw me prune in May. I will put these videos at the end and also below in the description area if you're interested in those as well. The bottom is an easy way to make your shrub look a little bit more behaved, because you just trim all that back. And in this instance, I'm going to have to trim this pretty far back because we think we have a sprinkler leak for a sprinkler that's actually underneath here. So I am going to have to trim it back a little bit more than I would normally. And then after that, I'm going to go into the shrub, because then I'll be able to actually get in here a little bit easier. And that's when I'm going to tackle the height. And you can see the height is varying heights, and I'll tackle that last. Now let me show you exactly how easy it is to prune a Rheingold Arborvitae. So here's one section of the Rheingold. And what I want to show you is that when you get back in here, if you go all the way back in, you're going to see brown. And the brown is where it doesn't get any sunlight, and so you'll see branches look like they're dead inside. So let's look at this branch. Now you see it's nice and green up here, and if you follow my gloved hand down here, it's mostly brown, okay? Now, if you were to cut all the way back down where it's just all brown, it's not that it's not ever going to grow back. It will, but it's going to take a long time. Rheingold Arborvitaes take a long time to grow if you severely cut them like that. So we don't want to go back that far. Instead, what we want to do is want to go back enough where there's still some green growth. All right, so I took just this much off. Now this is, I don't know what that is, maybe 3-4 inches. So you can't even see where I made this first cut, but let me show you. Right in here, if you look at the stem, it's got brown on the rest of it, but right here on the end where my glove is, you see these two nice green growths coming out of the stem. Those are going to get larger, and those are going to produce more. And you might even get more growth on the stem eventually as it gets more sun. One of the first things I'd suggest you do is pull away very gently what it looks like inside, because you'll see along the main stem is brand new growth. So it wants to push growth out. It's just been kind of shielded a little bit. It will still produce growth, but this way you're not going to cut all the way back into the brown. Now in this situation, what I'm starting to do is I'm just not being that specific, because I have a lot that I've got to trim back. So instead of just finding a nice spot to trim every individual branch, which would take me forever and would take you forever, which is why some people like to grab the electric hedge trimmers. Just grab here, you see there's green underneath, and make a cut. Yeah, you're going to see some of the cuts, but it's the easiest way to begin to make a little bit more sense of what's going on with the shrub. So that's really how easy it is to trim your Rheingold. Now, the other thing you're possibly going to see here is I have this whole other trunk that has formed, and that also happens if you don't keep your Rheingolds very trimmed to begin with. They will form almost like extra trees. So I'm going to prune this back a little bit, and we'll see if it does get to a point where maybe I have to cut this whole thing off. I'm not sure, but right now I'm going to start with the sides. Now you notice what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing and cutting. As long as I see green on the other side of my pruners, and I'm not pruning all the way back to the brown, I'm good. There will be some sections, and I'll show you when I get finished, where you will see some brown showing through. And again, that shouldn't happen to you if you are really good about keeping after your shrubs. What's also great about you doing this in the springtime, which is the proper time to prune, is that's when the new growth is going to kick in. And when you prune a shrub, any kind of shrub, whether it's a flowering shrub or it's an evergreen, the pruning encourages the shrub to start growing again. All right, now before I tackle the height, I am going to attempt to cut this back all the way to the, do you see that? That's where the edging goes. I think at the very bottom I am going to run into some brown, but if I do it successfully, maybe there'll still be some green. I say maybe. But this is also, by trimming back from the bottom, that is also a way to give your shrub the illusion that it is a little bit more coiffed and shaped up. Wow, this goes way back. This ought to be interesting. I still have probably, between 6 and 12 inches to go back even further. That is crazy. I don't think I'm going to go back that far. I think that's going to be too much brown, but I am happy to at least see the circle of the pavers. I will trim this a little bit to just try to shape it up. The good news is there is some green down here, but I don't want to make it, I don't want to make it too crazy. What you'll see is there's not even really any of the gravel here. It's all kind of, you know, either been washed away or just pushed away. So it will be nice to fill this back in and make it look a little bit nicer. Yeah, see, this is giving me a little bit more courage to go a little bit further back. Okay, now I'm going to come back in here, move all this aside, maybe do a little bit more. And what I'm doing with the sides is I'm trying to make it so that there's not any, you know, sudden angle. Instead, you kind of want the shape to be, the shrub to be, have more of a rounded shape. Oh yeah, that's a brown patch. That is definitely a brown patch. Now this area is where I have to be kind of ruthless, because this is where I think the leak might be in the sprinklers. But I can't even imagine how far back I'm going to have to go just to get this to where we can actually find the sprinkler head. It'll be like a Where's Waldo game. Where's the sprinkler head? So now I'm ready to tackle the height, and I may be running into a little bit of a problem. Remember in the beginning how I showed you that there were different heights it seemed to be throughout this? Well, that's because this thick trunk here has become its own stem. And if you see how I'm moving that, all of this is attached to this. Now you might think, not a big deal. What I can do is I can just, you know, trim it. Why don't I just cut it to there? The hard part about this is that many times, if you have separate leaders on a shrub, you know, separate thick stems that are almost growing like their own shrub, if you cut the central stem, it may make all of this not be as good. And what I mean by that, it sounds very vague, but I've read everything from it could kill off this section of the shrub to it could make everything more scraggly and open and not so lush and full. I've read all sorts of things on it. So here's the deal. I want to reduce the height. So I can't have this here, and I may end up cutting a lot of this section off anyway if we have to continue finding the sprinkler head. So I'm going to do an experiment, and I'm going to cut this leader and a lot of the other ones around down, and we're just going to see what happens. And we'll revisit this. Like I said, it's November, and we'll revisit this next spring and summer, and we'll just continue to see how this grows. Hopefully it won't be affected at all, but we'll see. So I am going to cut some of these down, and fingers crossed that this will work. If it doesn't, you'll know what not to do. Now, because this is so thick, I'm going to just automatically use my short-handled loppers. And I'm literally going to just go right to here. I'm just going to go for it. Ouch, that was a little painful, right? But look how much height I took down. My goodness, that's quite a bit of height. So that's what I'm going to continue doing to take the height down. And we'll see how it goes. You know, doing this is liberating At the same time, it's kind of scary. Now here is another leader. You can see when I'm shaking this just how much is connected to this. There you go. But what's really nice is you see all this? This is just nice growth. So if anything, I'm making it look more squat. Lovely horticultural term. Okay, now this one, I see some new growth right, oh, this will be a good example to show you. I'm going to cut this one off. Ready? Look at that. All right, now I'm way over here. Okay, again, I'm going to hope for the best. Is this scaring you? It's scaring me a little bit. But what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen is, I guess the worst would be the whole shrub dies, right? That would be the absolute worst. That's not going to happen. I know that's not going to happen. So once you realize that the worst is not going to happen, then it becomes more calming, right? Then you can say, oh, if the worst isn't going to happen, I'm pretty good. So every so often, step back and admire your work. I don't know if you want to call it that, but step back, check your work, make sure that you're kind of even though it's a more of a natural shrub. And the reason I say that is because my tendency is maybe to not trim as much here, and then it would be more of a shrub going down this way. So I have to be conscious of the fact that I want to make sure it stays more in a rounded form. Wow, I took a lot off. Hee! So again, here's the unpruned one. That would look beautiful if it was in the wild, right? And then here is the progress so far on this guy. See what I mean by, I feel like we made him more squat? Oh, and we didn't do this. No, you had nothing to do with it. It's all me. I'm not trying to transfer the blame, but look at these. Look how thick some of these guys were. Look at that. That's pretty thick. Now for the most part, you don't see where I made the cuts, but there is one that I want to show you up close. So this is a great example because you can see all of the new growth that was still left on the inside, even hidden among all this brown that you see here, was some new growth. So yes, you can still see that as a big cut, but before you know it, that green is going to fill in and it won't be sticking out so much. Look how much underneath all of those tall trunks that I removed, look how much you can see of green growth. This was all covered. This is a brown section here. And this is right where the sea green juniper has always butted up against the Rheingold. So it's not surprising that this was a little brown. But again, you see there's some green here, there's some green there. So it's going to fill in. I'm not worried about it. And here's how I got underneath. So I cut it back a little bit, and you do see some brown down here. This is at the very bottom. But you don't see it as much when you're standing up. I still would like to cut back even further, but I think I'm going to leave that for today and just come back and revisit it and see what I think. So now what I want to do is come back in here with the hand pruners and just tidy it up a little bit and then see what I'm left with. I think it's going to be more round like this, but I don't want to cut too far back into the brown. I still want to keep it nice, especially for the winter time. But you see how it looks a lot more natural by not using hedge trimmers. Hedge trimmers would have taken all this off. Hedge trimmers does this. You know, it just cuts everything back. And you really want a lot of this nice natural growth that even though I cut so much away, you still see so much of it. It looks just still very fluffy, Very full, very lush. So this is looking a lot more tame and coiffed and shaped than I usually prefer. I really like the natural look of shrubs, but this was just too big, too out of control. So here it is in a much needed, taken down the height, try to bring the sides in a little bit, trim up the bottom. This is the Rheingold Arborvitae all pruned up. I'm 90% happy with it. What I don't like is I still feel like this is a little too wide over here. So I'm gonna let it, I'll live with it for a day or two and come back out and kind of think about, do I want to cut it in more? I think I will be exposing some brown if I do that, but I may want to come in and do that. I know I'm gonna have to cut in through the bottom more to find the sprinkler head. I'm not looking forward to that. And for the most part, I think this looks good. So I'm not necessarily a fan of circular shrubs, so that's a little bit what's hard for me as well. But it sure looks a heck of a lot better. You can actually see the sea green juniper behind it. We'll actually be able to see beyond it into the backyard from our house, which is nice. And when I'm standing here, I can now see some of the other shrubs in this area. I can see the King's Gold Mop Cypress. I can see the burning bush, which is looking gorgeous. So it was necessary. So for a before and after, this is the one I still have to prune. You can see how tall, it's almost about 6 feet tall. Then you can see the one just pruned. And if you're interested in more pruning of evergreens, you can watch this video next to show you how I pruned the King's Gold Mop Cypress, and also how I pruned the sea green holly back there. And until next time, happy gardening.